वारण्ये यं परेशन् मामायुतं दिव्या अजन्ना मारेति तं जान्य वसलो।
गाँव में मतलब गाँव में या वा यदि वारण्य या रण्य मतलब गाँव फॉरेस्ट में यम परेशम ममायति जो दूसरे की चीज है उसको चुरा लेता कहते हैं मेरी है। यम परेशम मतलब दूसरे की है, ममायति वो कहता है मेरी है मतलब चुरा लेता है। थे या अदिन्नम दान थी जो जिसको नहीं दिया गया और उसको रख लेता है कि दूसरों की प्रॉपर्टी है। तम जन्यावसलो सच ए पर्सन इज known to be an outcast.
यो हवे इनाम मयादय
इन्नम आदाय
इन्नम आदाय चूज मनो पुण्य
इसको छोड़ दे ब्रैकेट में पलायति
पलायति ना ही ते इन्यमच्छति तं जन्न वसलो इति।
यो हवे इनम आदाय इन मतलब ऋण जिसने ऋण लेके चिज मानो पलायति भाग जाता है उसको देखिए क्या कहते हैं नहीं थे ना माथी वो ये कह के भाग जाता है कि मैंने तो कोई डेट नहीं लिया कुछ नहीं लिया ऐसे आदमी नो हिम एज एन आउटकास्ट। योगे किंचिख कम्यता पंथस्मिन् वजंतम जनम अंत्वा किंचिखम आदेति तम जन्यावसलो। जो किंचित मतलब बहुत थोड़ी सी चीज को काम्यता उसकी इसके अंदर का कामना है जो इवन फॉर लव ऑफ ए स्मॉल थिंग पंथस्मिन् वजतम जन्म जो रास्ते में जा रहा हो आदमी उसको मार के अंतवा किंचित काम आ मार के उसको जो छोटी सी चीज है वो ले लेता है। नो हिम टू बी एन आउटकास्ट
छोटी सी चीज
for anything but he is pointing out that even if he takes a little thing then also he will be called righteous.
अत्ता हेतु परा हेतु धन हेतु च यो नरो सत्यपुत्रो मूसा भूति तम जान्य वसदो।
अत्य हेतु मतलब अपने लिए, पर हेतु दूसरे के लिए, धन हेतु वेल्थ के लिए। जो आदमी सख्य पुत्र मूसा वृत्ति मतलब साक्षी जब उसको बुलाया जाए विटनेस के तौर पर कहीं बुलाया जाए कोर्ट में और वो झूठ बोल देता है उसको आप समझोगे चंडाल। ये मैं तरह से कोर्ट में लगा देना चाहिए।
यो ज्ञातिनां सखीनां वा दारेषु पटिदिशति सहसा संपीयन वा तं जाम्य वसलो इति।
जो ज्ञातिनम मतलब अपने रिश्तेदारों की, सखीनम या फ्रेंड्स की, दारेषु पटिवृत्ति और उनकी पत्नियों के साथ दिखता है। सहसा संप्रिय नवा सहसा मतलब फोर्स से या तो जान जोर जबरदस्ती से या इवन विद देयर कंसेंट तम जन्यावसलो उसको भी आउटकास्ट मानना चाहिए। यो मातरम पितरम वा जिन्नकम गत योगनम कहु संतो न भराति तम जन्यावसलो। यो मातरम पितरम वा भातरम भगिनीम ससुम अंति रोसेति वाचाया तम जन्या वसलो। लास्ट इस सेक्शन हाफ है पूरा नहीं है। यो मातरम पितरम जो माता को पिता को जिन्नक कते योगनम जब उनका यौवन चला गया और बूढ़े हो गए हैं बहु संतो न भरती he can and yet he doesn't support them know him to be an outcast. यो मातरम पितरम वा जो माता को पिता को भातरम भाई को भगिनी सिस्टर को ससुम और मदर-इन-लॉ को अंतिरो सेति वाचाया जो उनको मारता है या इवन हार्ड वर्ड्स ही annoys them with harsh words तम जन्यावसलो इसको आउटकास्ट I think 15 more verses. You can see many of these were a part of the Paravo Sutta also. ये चल रहा लॉगिन करना
ऑनलाइन सेशन कर रहे हैं बुक सर हम ऑनलाइन ई बुक पे Srishi saying not annoying mother-in-law may be hard.
You're not saying annoying, just speaking words which are annoying. Mother-in-law may be annoyed by kind words also. Then it's okay.
Or you can annoy without speaking also.
That you can't do anything.
Can you see the screen and the 8th chapter, Creative Morality? Yes. लूप्स देखना तुम वो लिखे हो ना
ये लाइट जला
It is perhaps a paradox to talk about creative morality, for morality is derived from a word meaning custom and convention, and the regulation of life by rules. But morality has also come to mean the working of love in human relations. And in this sense, we can speak of a morality which is creative. Saint Augustine described it as love and do what you will. But the problem has always been how to love what you do not like. If morality is the art of living together, it is clear that rules or rational techniques have a place in it. For many of the problems of a community are technical problems: the distribution of wealth and population, the proper management of natural resources, the organization of family life, the care of sick and disabled, and the harmonious adaptation of individual differences. The moralist is therefore a technician who is consulted on these problems as one consults an architect on building a house or an engineer on erecting a bridge. Like medicine, shoemaking, cookery, tailoring, farming, and carpentry, living together requires a certain know-how. It demands the acquisition and use of certain skills. So here he's equating morality with maybe social
ethics, professional ethics kind of thing.
but he's not relating morality with Sheila kind of things.
I think he'll come into picture first.
But the moralist
इस लीगलिटी में आ जाता है ना मॉरलिटी. आपको चोरी नहीं करनी है नहीं तो पकड़े जाओ. अगर आप सेक्सुअल मिसकंडक्ट करोगे तो पकड़े जाओ. सो इट हैज ए लीगलिस्टिक फ्रेमवर्क. यूजुअली मोस्ट पीपल टेक इट इन दैट सेंस. ये रूल ऑफ लॉ है. ऑल दी शीला जो हैं दे आर एनश्राइंड एज अ रूल ऑफ लॉ आल्सो. ऑल ऑफ देम. All the five are enshrined as this.
But the moralist has in practice become much more than a technical consultant. He has become a scold. From his pulpit or his study, he harangues the human race, issuing praise and blame, mostly blame, like fire from the mouth of a dragon. For people do not take his advice. They ask how it is best to act under such circumstances. He tells them and they seem to agree and he is right. But when they go away and do something different, or they find his advice too difficult or have a strong desire to do the opposite. This happens so regularly that moralist loses his temper and begins to call them bad names. When this has no effect, he resorts to physical violence, implementing his advice with policemen, punishments and prisons. For the community, it is its own moralist. It erects and pays judges, policemen and preachers, as if to say, when I am difficult, please kick me. At first sight, the problem seems to boil down to this. Morals are for avoiding an unfair distribution of pleasure and pain. This means that some individuals must get less pleasure and some more pain. As a rule, these individuals will only submit to the sacrifice under threat or still more pain if they do not cooperate. This is based on the assumption that even man is for himself, every man is for himself and observes the interests of community only to the extent that these are obviously his own interests. From this, moralists have evolved the theory that man is basically selfish, or that he has an inherent bias towards evil. The natural man lives for one motive, to protect his body from pain and to associate it with pleasure. Because he can only feel with his own body, he has little interest in the feelings of other bodies. Therefore, he will only take interest in other bodies under the stimulus of rewards and punishment, that is, by an exploitation of his self-interest in the interest of the community. Happily, the problem is not quite so simple, for among the things that give man pleasure are relations with other human beings, conversation, eating together, singing, dancing, having children, and cooperation in work, which many hands make light. Indeed, one of the highest pleasures is to be more or less conscious of one's own existence, unconscious of one's own existence, to be absorbed in interesting sights, sounds, places, and people. Conversely, one of the greatest pains is to be self-conscious, to be unabsorbed and cut off from the community and the surrounding world. But this whole problem has no solution while we think about it in terms of the pleasure-pain motivation, or indeed in terms of any motivation at all. For man has a moral problem, which other community living animals do not have, and for very reason that he is so much concerned with motives. If it is true that man is necessarily motivated by the pleasure-pain principle, there is no point whatsoever in discussing human conduct. Motivated conduct is determined conduct. It will be what it will be, no matter what anyone has to say about it. There can be no creative morality unless man has the possibility of freedom. This is where the moralists make their mistakes. If they want man to change his way of life, they must assume that he is free. For if he is not, all the raging and protesting in the world will make no difference. On the other hand, a man who is acting from the fear of a moralist's threats or from the lure of his promises is not making a free act. If man is not free, threats and promises may modify his conduct, but they will not change it in any essential respect. If he is free, threats and promises will not make him use his freedom. The meaning of freedom can never be grasped by the divided mind. If I feel separate from my experience and from the world, freedom will seem to be the extent to which I push the world around. The fate and the fate and fate the extent to which the world pushes me around. But to the whole mind there is no contrast of I and the world. There is just one process acting and it does everything that happens. It raises my little finger and it creates earthquakes. Or, if you want to put it that way, I raise my little finger and also make earthquakes. No one fates and no one is being fated. So here he uses, if you want to put it this way, I raise my finger and almost I make earthquakes.
So it's using I in the sense of consciousness.
Right, and sometimes he does not prefer to use the word I there.
He's also creative.
Actually, he
use the
switches.
words in the you can move from one end to the other very quickly.
He switches from the Vedantic philosophy and the Buddhist non-self very fluidly. Of course, this is a strange view of freedom. We are accustomed to think that if there is any freedom at all, it resides not in nature, but in the separate human will and its power of choice. But what we ordinarily mean by choice is not freedom. Choices are usually decisions motivated by pleasure and pain, and the divided mind acts with the sole purpose of getting I into pleasure and out of pain. But the best pleasures are those for which we do not plan, and the worst part of the pain is expecting it and trying to get away from it when it has come. You cannot plan to be happy. You can plan to exist, but in themselves, existence and non-existence are neither pleasurable nor painful. I am even assured by doctors that there are circumstances under which death can be highly pleasant experience. Really? That is.
मतलब आप बेहोश हो गए और पेन खत्म हो गया ऐसे आदमी नर्स होती
But it's difficult to predict what the person who's dying even in the sleep or anesthesia, what that feeling is.
assumption.
Yeah. The sense of not being free comes from trying to do things which are impossible and even meaningless. You are not free to draw a square circle, to live without a head, or to stop certain reflex actions. These are not obstacles to freedom. They are the conditions of freedom. I am not free to draw a circle if perchance it should turn out to be a square circle. I am not, thank heaven, free to walk out of the doors and leave my head at home. Likewise, I am not free to live in any moment but this one, or to separate myself from my feelings. In short, I am not free when I am trying to do something contradictory, such as to move without changing position, or to burn my finger without feeling pain. On the other hand, I am free, the world processes as free, to do something which is not a contradiction. The question then arises, is it a contradiction? Is it impossible to act or to decide without pleasure as the ultimate aim? The theory that we must inevitably do what gives us greater pleasure or the lesser pain is a meaningless assertion based on verbal confusion. To say that I decide to do something because it pleases me says only that I decide to do it because I decide to do it. If pleasure is defined in the beginning as what I prefer, then what I prefer will always be pressure. So this is very powerful.
तो change कर दिया word का meaning.
If I prefer pain like a masochist, then pain will be pleasure. In short, the theory begs the question at the start by saying that pleasure means what we desire. Therefore, anything that we desire is pleasure. But I fall straight into contradiction when I try to act and decide in order to be happy, when I may make being pleased my future goal. For the more my actions and directed towards future pleasures are directed towards future pleasures, the more I am incapable of enjoying my pleasures at all. For all pleasures are present, and nothing save complete awareness this present can even begin to guarantee future happiness. I can act in order to eat tomorrow, or take a trip in the mountains. I can act in order to eat tomorrow or take a trip to the mountain next week. But there is really no way of being certain that this will make me happy. On the contrary, it is common experience that nothing ruins a pleasure so much as watching yourself in the midst of it to see whether it pleases you. You can only live in one moment at a time, and you cannot think simultaneously about listening to the waves and whether you are enjoying listening to the waves. Contradictions of this kind are the only real types of actions without freedom. There is another theory of determinism which states that all our actions are motivated by unconscious mental mechanisms, and that for this reason even the most spontaneous decisions are not free. This is but another example of split-mindedness. For what is the difference between me and mental mechanisms, whether conscious or unconscious? Who is being moved by these processes? The notion that anyone is being motivated comes from persisting illusions of I. The real man, the organism in relation to the universe, is the unconscious motivation. And because he is it, he is not being moved by it. In other words, it is not motivation, it is simply operation. Moreover, there is no unconscious mind distinct from the conscious, and the unconscious mind is conscious, though not of itself, just as eyes see but do not see themselves. There remains the supposition that whole operation, the whole process of action, which is man and universe, man and universe, is a determined series of events in which every event is the inevitable result of past causes. We cannot go into this problem exhaustively or even adequately, but it is perhaps enough to realize for the moment that this is one of the biggest open questions of science, which is far from reaching a decision. The idea that past determines the present can be an illusion of language, because we must describe the present in terms of the past. It would seem that the past explains the present. To say how something happened, we describe the chain of events of which it seems to be part of. The bottle smashed, it fell on the floor. I let it go, my fingers were slippery. I had soap on my hands. Is it legitimate to put words because between these statements? We do so as a rule, for we can make the safe bet that if I let go of the bottle, it will fall to the floor. But this does not prove that I caused it to fall, or that it must have fallen. Events look inevitable in retrospect because when they have happened, nothing can change them. Yet the fact that I can make safe bets could prove equally well that events are not determined but consistent. In other words, universal process acts freely and spontaneously at every moment, but tends to throw out events in regular and so predictable sequences. However this issue may be decided, the undivided mind certainly has the feeling of freedom, and certainly brings into the moral sphere a way of life which has all the marks of free and creative action. It is easy to see that most of the acts which, in conventional morals, are called evils can be traced to the divided mind. By far the greater part of these acts come from exaggerated desires for things which are not even remotely necessary for the health of mind and body, granting that health is in relative terms. Such outlandish and insatiable desires come from being because man is exploiting his appetite to give the I a sense of security. I am depressed and want to get I out of this depression. The opposite of depression is elation. But because depression is not elation, I cannot force myself to be elated. I can, however, get drunk. This makes me wonderfully elated, and so when the next depression arrives, I have a quick cure. The subsequent depressions have a way of getting deeper and blacker because I am not digesting the depressed state and eliminating its poisons. So I need to get even drunker to drown them. Very soon I begin to hate myself for getting so drunk, which makes me still more depressed, and so it goes. Or perhaps I have a large family and I'm living in a mortgaged house on which I have spent all my savings. I have to work hard at a job in which I am not particularly interested in order to pay the bills. I don't mind working so much, but I keep wondering what will happen if I get sick or if a war comes and I am drafted. I would rather not think about these things, so I want to get I out of this worry. For I am sure that I shall get sick if it goes on. But it's so hard to stop, and as this makes sickness more certain, the worrying digs deeper. I must find relief from this, and so in depression I begin to play the ponies, trying to offset the worry with the daily hope that my may win, and so it goes. The conventional moralist has nothing to contribute to these problems. He can point out the frightful effects of alcoholism and gambling, but that is simply more fuel for depression and worry. He can promise rewards in heaven for suffering patiently endured, but that too is a gamble of a kind. He can attribute the depression or the worry to the social system and urge the unfortunates to join the revolution. In short, he can either frighten the eye or encourage it, in one case making the individual run away from himself and in other making him run after himself. He can glowing pictures of the virtues and encourage others to find strength in the examples of great men. He can succeed to the extent of arousing the most vigorous efforts to imitate saintliness, to curb the passion, and to practice restraint and charity in action. Yet none of this brings anyone to freedom, for behind all the imitations and the discipline there is still motive. If I am afraid, my efforts to feel and act bravely are moved by the fear. For I am afraid of fear, which is simply to say that all my efforts to escape from what I am are moving in a circle. Beside the examples of saints and heroes, I feel ashamed that I amount to nothing, and so I begin to practice humility because of my wounded pride, the charity because of my self-love. The urge is ever to make I amount to something. I must be right, good, a real person, heroic, loving, self-effacing. I efface myself in order to assert myself, and give myself away in order to keep myself. The whole thing is contradiction. But so in general, uh, the the motives are always there behind actions. But is there a difference between the motive behind non-wholesome actions and wholesome actions?
In the, what do you think? Most of the time the effort is to avoid pain and gain pleasure most of the time. Unless we are motivated by love, that's not the part we do. And the psychologist's statement that most of us are motivated by pleasure-pain principle is true. Only when we are moving in the direction of understanding I properly, becoming less self-conscious,
then love emerges and you're motivated by love. And then you can do things for other reasons.
So this reminds me of an example.
Like you may do an act of charity out of love, or out of a feeling of remorse for being so wealthy by unfair means.
Right. Or you may do act of charity because morally you should be doing it.
Or it will give me a good image. And people will know I am such a nice person. I am such a generous person.
Because I was reading, listening to a talk, and where he referred to a philosopher who, a professor of philosophy who conducted an experiment in his class, and he wanted to see the effects of certain actions of and their longevity. So he told the class on a Friday that as a part of the experiment, I will give you a day off and a free movie today. So all of them were very elated and went and had a movie and party. And I think the next week he said we will go to a orphanage and help some children out together. As a class they went, and I think after a session or so, around a month and a half, he said, "Which one do you still remember and feel it has a lasting impact on you?" So almost everybody said that visit to an orphanage. So, is there something inherent in doing wholesome actions that
So the wholesome qualities, the Brahma Viharas, what we call us, they're all inside us. It's not that we have to bring them from outside. They're lying dormant because of attachments, aversions, expectations. So when an opportunity arises and they get manifested because those are shut off, our self-image is shut off, then obviously we are manifesting our true nature. So what we have falsely acquired from outside will obviously produce a much lesser impact than what is the true nature of us.
and in the same context that he's talking about, all these things primarily being motivated by the motive of I or motive of getting more pleasure because it seems more pleasurable to the psyche. You feel good about it.
Most of the time you are doing actions for that consideration only, isn't it? But
Is there
once in a while we do motivation by others, by love, compassion, kindness, sharing joy of others. Or even equanimity.
and there's no way kind of find out or evaluate whether
तो मुझे खुद ही मालूम पड़ेगा तो इसका सब्जेक्टिव वैल्यूएशन तो नहीं हो सकता, ऑब्जेक्टिव वैल्यूएशन तो नहीं हो सकता, जनरली सब्जेक्टिव वैल्यूएशन
you can only find out.
But sir, एक चीज ये है कि even if doing some wholesome action or even if helping somebody with some motivation, like you want to feel good, but slowly the effects of those action can turn you towards more wholesome. Yeah, if you're mindful that. If you're mindful, yes. The actions then they create a new groove in the brain of doing work of that kind. But if associated with that is ego, then you'll do more of this, but again to boost the ego. You set up give a donation, then you want more to be given, then you want एक नाम प्लेट पे लगा दो, कम से कम कुछ तो करो. इतना डोनेशन कर दिया मतलब
Expression go in both ways. The Christian mind has always been haunted by the feeling that the sins of the saints are worse than the sins of the sinners. And in that, in some mysterious way, the one who is struggling for salvation is nearer to hell and, and to the heart of evil than the unashamed heart, the harlot of thief. It has recognized that the devil is in the angel, and as pure spirit is not really interested in the sins of the flesh. The sins of the devil's heart are the intricacies of spiritual pride, the mazes of self-deception, and the subtle mockeries of hypocrisy, where mask hides behind mask, and reality is lost altogether. The would-be saint walks straight into the meshes of this web because he would become a saint. His eye finds the deepest security in a satisfaction, which is the more intense for being so cleverly hidden, the satisfaction of being contrite for his sins and contrite for making pride in his contrition. In such an involved vicious circle, the masks behind masks are infinite. Or, to put it another way, he who would stand outside himself to kick himself must then kick the self that stands outside, and so forever. So this is true for thinking that I will be enlightened someday. It is the same circle. So long as there is the motive to become something, so long as the mind believes in the possibility of escape from what it is at this moment, there can be no freedom. Virtue will be pursued for exactly the same reason as vice, and good and evil will alternate as the opposite poles of a single circle. The saint who appears to have conquered his self-love by spiritual violence has only concealed it. Spiritual violence. His apparent success convinces others that he has found the true way, and they will follow his example long enough for the course to swing to its opposite pole. When license becomes the inevitable reaction to Puritanism. Of course, it sounds as if it were the most abject fatalism to have to commit that I am what I am, and that no escape or division is possible. It seems that if I am afraid, then I am stuck with fear. But in fact, I am chained to the fear only so long as I am trying to get away from it. On the other hand, when I do not want to get away, I discover that there is nothing stuck or fixed about the reality of the moment. When I am aware of this feeling without naming it, without calling it fear, bad, negative, etc., it changes instantly into something else, and life moves freely ahead. The feeling no longer perpetuates itself by creating the feeler behind it. We can perhaps see now why the undivided mind is not moved into these escapes from the present, which are usually called evil. The further truth that the undivided mind is aware of experience as a unity of the world as itself, and that the whole nature of mind and awareness is to be one with that it knows, suggests a state 131 suggests a state that would usually be called love. For the love that expresses itself in creative action is something much more than an emotion. It is not something which you can feel and know, remember and define. Love is the organizing and unifying principle which makes the world a universe and the disintegrated mass of community. It is the very essence and character of mind and becomes manifest in action when the mind is whole. But the mind must be interested or absorbed in something, just as a mirror must always be reflecting something. When it is not trying to be interested in itself, as if the mirror would reflect itself, it must be interested or absorbed in other people and things. There is no problem how to love. Love, we are love, and the only problem is the direction of love, whether it is to go straight out like sunlight or to try to turn back on itself like a candle under a bushel. Released from the circle of attempted self-love, the mind of man draws the whole universe into its own unity, as a single dewdrop seems to contain the entire sky. This, rather than any other emotion, is the power and principle of free action and creative morality. On the other hand, the morality of rules and regulations based on rewards and punishments, even when these are as intelligible as the pain of guilt and the pleasure of self-respect, has no relation to free action. It is a way of ruling slaves by benevolent exploitation of the illusions, and however far pursued can never lead to freedom. Where there is to be creative action, it is quite beside the point to discuss what we should or should not do in order to be right or good. A mind that is single and sincere is not interested in being good, in conducting relations with others so as to live up to a rule, nor on the other hand it is interested in being free, in acting perversely just to prove its independence. Its interest is not in itself, but in the people and problems of which it is aware. These are itself. It acts not according to the rules, but according to the circumstances of the moment, and the well it wishes to others is not security, but liberty. Nothing is really more inhuman than human relations based on morals. When a man gives bread in order to be charitable, lives with a woman in order to be faithful, eats with a Negro in order to be unprejudiced, and refuses to kill in order to be peaceful, he is as cold as a crab. He does not actually see the other person. Only a little less chilly is the benevolence springing from pity, which acts to remove suffering because it finds the sight of it disgusting. But there is no formula for generating the authentic warmth of love. It cannot be copied. You cannot talk yourself into it or rouse it by straining at the emotion or by dedicating yourself solemnly to the service of mankind. Everyone has love, but it can only come out when he is convinced of the impossibility and frustration of trying to love himself. This conviction will not come through condemnation, through hating oneself, through calling self-love all the bad names in the universe. It comes only in the awareness that one has no self to love.
Now it comes from awareness, this is the mind. Powerful statement.
Any comments from Pankaj, Chilesh, Sudhakar? So Arpan is left, we had to go somewhere.
Green. And put it on the green part. You prefer green tea or madam's tea?
कोई भी ग्रीन भी चलेगी
Green tea चलेगी। वो बना रही हैं अपने लिए, मैंने कहा
अच्छा
between her tea and my tea. So people, at least one of you should take it. What is the next
chapter?
Religion reviewed. I think that is the last one. So this is morality and action from wholesome intention.
You have to say that love comes only in awareness that there is no one side. Very powerful statement. It's very true. As long as you are self-conscious, you can be morally right, but not really. Should be moral.
So then how is Kushalupaya kind of things come into
Based on the past. He's talking of the absolute final way.
but then when somebody reads or tries to understand this and the Kushalupaya kind of dilemma comes in real life.
Kushalupaya are stepping stones. Ladder है ना जैसे ladder पे.
But then when one gets into this confusion that the Kushalupayas are also getting me into the same thing.
Necessarily it depends on how we look at them. If we see that means as an end in itself, then we are likely to be satisfied with that. So we won't investigate deeply. If we think them as means, then we'll try to investigate the end क्या है.
If you don't think them as end in themselves.
हाँ.
But abandoning them also is not useful because we could understand this intellectually, but we don't live this.
Abandonment is not the issue. Just as self-condemnation is not the issue, because I have no self. Or I am being selfish, so I condemn myself. Understanding is the issue.
It's abandoning not in the sense of condemning it, but abandoning in the sense in preferring a free whatever comes I'll do it. Versus why should I make efforts to do Kushalupaya?
You can fight out this. That's interesting. If one is able to maintain that sense of emptiness and actions, then that's perfectly fine. But if that becomes a disguise for miserliness or disguise for boosting ego, that one is to be constant on the watch. तो मैं दान को देता हूँ तो मेरे मन में शुद्ध भाव नहीं है, परफेक्टली सेल्फलेस नहीं है, तो मैं दान देना ही बंद कर देता हूँ. And then I must see which direction I am moving. Am I, as a result, becoming more self-conscious and keeping things for myself and getting attached to them? Or दान देने का महत्व ही कि you have to kind of reduce your attachment to wealth and in the common morality sense. That's a step in reducing attachment to I actually. If we do it properly, with proper understanding, it should eventually reduce attachment to Firstly, it reduces attachment to my
Hmm.
well, and as you see it further, you realize it's not mine. See it further, you realize there is no I actually who can hold the world. तो होगा तो ग्रेजुएट टीचिंग से ही होगा। पढ़ा था ना हमने ओशन वाला जो एग्जाम्पल था,
ओशन वाला कौन
टीचिंग कैसे करते हैं तो कहते हैं जैसे समुद्र में बीच पे चल रहे हैं और बीच पे आप जाते हैं तो धीरे 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 समुद्र गहरा होता चला जाता है। So that's how I teach. From the level at which you are, then take you deeper and deeper into the ocean. And then a point comes and the ocean suddenly goes. It does not taper gently all the time, so it right up to the end. Up to a certain level it tapers and then it just drops off in the bottom. That's a very good metaphor to understand.
So generally
It's extremist point of view हो जाता है ना. You go from one extreme to the other extreme. बीच में रोकने पाता. बीच का बात सचमुच में काफी strike a balance is a very very tough job.
the dilemma, for example, comes with that when you find that you're not the you're not doing some actions from the perfection of completely doing it from non-self. And then you say, should I make efforts to do these, or should I make efforts to understand how to do it how to reduce my it comes like कि मुझे समझ आ रहा है कि एक्सेस जो है ये सेल्फ से आ रहे हैं तो होता ये है कि ये एक्शन करूं कि ना करूं.
अगर एक्शन होलसम है तो rather than dropping the action, I should drop the motive. If you drop the motive, change the motive. Is on gone or
No. Sorry.
you are still there listening?
Pankaj is there, sir.
Yeah.
Pankaj is there.
So you can tell him that we will send the link and we can practice that.
So Pankaj, we actually played a Metta chant during the meditation, but unfortunately the audio was not working. And we sent the link to the online recording of the Metta chant.
You can do at the end of meditation practice. Listen to it and because it is listening is other people can listen.
Yeah.
Peacefully sit and you can play it in service of his father. जो शादी में करेंगे तो फिर समझ नहीं आएगा. तो ये करेंगे अंग्रेजी में तो समझ आएगा.
Actually, meaning से जब वो अंदर feel that emotion.
It sinks inside only when you know the meaning.
Yeah.
You can play Bengali method. जो हिंदी वाली है वो वाली प्ले कर सकते हैं.
सबका मंगल हो.
सबका मंगल.
Okay, Pankaj, we'll close the session for today. Wish him all the best from all of us.
So it's a difficult time, but take heart. All of us have to go through it and have gone through it. Some have gone, some will go. That's the way life is. So take care of your father to the last moment, to the best of your ability. Keep him pleased and happy to the extent that it is.
Okay, Pankaj, we'll talk to you again.